Give me your heart, give me your soul, sing it with all your might. Come to the fountain and you will be satisfied. There is a peace, there is a love, you can get lost inside. Come to the fountain and you can get lost inside. Let me testify.
Hi guys, how are you? Happy Delight Day. This week we continued talking about Acts. We picked up from last week. So last week we learned that Luke wrote Acts and that it was a sequel to his gospel and that it was written for, I really might say this wrong, but Theophilus, which means lover of God. And so even if it was written for a specific person, we can interpret it as being written for us because we are lovers of God. And also its purpose is to continue the story of all that Jesus did and taught. So we start off, this week we went through Acts chapter 2, which covers Pentecost. And I think in my head, I don't know, maybe it's the same for you guys, maybe it's not. Pentecost is a few weeks after Easter, or is it a week after Easter? It's something like that. And so I always associate it with Easter, but I think growing up I never really understood the significance of Pentecost. Like it was always just like something they talked about in church, you know what I mean? Like it was like, great, check it off the list, let's move on. But I really have not given it the attention it deserves, because rereading this chapter, you just realize how amazing like this whole thing is. So Jesus promised two things when he ascended into heaven. He had promised two things, and it was that power would be received by his disciples, that they would have the power to move forward and continue his church, and that they would be his witnesses. And so at the beginning of the chapter we talk about this week, we see they're all these people are in a room together, and they're obviously, Jesus just left them, like now it's up to them to do God's work, which is like a pretty hefty mission if we think about it. At least I know I feel overwhelmed, like thinking I'm not even in their shoes, and I cannot even imagine the weight of having to carry that. But then all of a sudden, like this wind blows through, and they all get tongues of fire above their head. And in Exodus, God is represented when he talks to Moses, like with the 10 Commandments, in fire. And so it's just another way of presenting that like God is with these people, and like making it easy to visualize in your head, like, okay, like he's like physically there, like you can see this fire. And they all begin to speak different languages so that they can speak of Jesus and like all of his actions and like the love he's shown us in all of these respective languages so that people understand them. And everyone is just amazed and perplexed, which brings us into one of the fill in the blank spots we had to fill in. And this one like particularly stood out to me. It's amazed and perplexed, they asked one another, what does this mean? Some, however, made fun of them and said, they have had too much wine. To this, Peter stands up and says in a loud voice, no, these people haven't had too much wine. It's 9 a.m. That's what he says, which like, okay, Peter, like we see you, you know what I mean? But I think it's super cool that like all of these people had witnessed this amazing thing, and when they tried to tell other people about it, it was dismissed. And I feel like that happens a lot in our own lives. We have these God moments, or we see this connection that may not be as clear to other people, or we attribute things to God because we think, well, we know in our hearts that all good things come from him, and it's like very hard to describe. And I know at least sometimes in my own mind, like I'll tell myself like, oh, I'm not worthy of like putting my foot down and saying like this is correct, because what do I know, you know what I mean? But I think we all can aspire to be like Peter in this way, and that we know in our hearts what's true, and at least true out of our own experiences, and to keep moving forward like that. But I also think Peter is unique in that his story is so much like ours. You see that he was originally named Simon, and he's the one who told Jesus that, like, these people think you're the Messiah. And because of that, Jesus renamed him Peter, which means rock, and he literally became the rock of the church. He was like Jesus's go-to guy, and even on top of that, like, despite all of like the respect that they had for each other and the love that Peter had for Jesus, he still betrayed him right before his death. And it made me realize, like, even like the strongest rock can be shattered. You know what I mean? Like, even having the strongest base, you can still, like, if your roots aren't firmly planted, even if they are firmly planted, like Peter's name literally meant rock, you can still feel the aftershocks of earthquakes when, like, in the metaphorical sense, you know what I mean? Like, something big will happen, and we don't always step up to the plate in the way we wish we had. Going off of this too, I'm sure Peter thought to himself, like, why did this happen to me? Why am I the person that needs to take on this responsibility? Why am I the one who had to betray him? Why was I put in this position where I could betray him? I think a lot of times too, we ask ourselves those questions. At least I ask myself those questions a lot. Like, why me? Why was I dealt the cards I was dealt? Especially when you're in a situation that it's really hard to see how God is putting purpose into that season in your life. And I think Peter took the time he needed to self-analyze and replant his roots and refine his faith, especially in the days after he betrayed Jesus. That this part I thought was really cool. That, quote, Peter's spirit was transformed by grace, and that because he relied on his faith, he was able to accomplish these things. There's also, I don't know if I have it pulled up still. Yeah, I do. Hold on, give me a second to find it. There was a part of the book that I thought was really, really good. Yes. Okay. So it's the last paragraph of page 24 that says, but because of what Jesus did on the cross, we get to approach the throne with all of our screw-ups, regrets, and messes. Jesus does the cleaning up, the sifting through, and the redeeming. He takes our broken pieces and makes us into new vessels that can be used to carry his goodness into the world. We see firsthand evidence of that through the life of Peter. Your mistakes don't cancel your worth and value. Rather, they are invitations to draw closer to Jesus and experience grace-filled transformation. I have to believe that Peter's story is so much like any of ours. And that's so true. His story is so much like ours. I feel like we all can identify with Peter in this way, and that we all have seasons in our life where there's painful and brokenness, and we don't understand what's going on or why this is happening or why we have to experience this pain or the feeling of failure. And there's so much purpose that can come from those times. And it's such a hard thing to realize and to remind yourself of, especially when you're in those valleys. It can be so hard to remember that God is right there with you and that he plans to turn your brokenness into purpose. But I think we can all aspire to be a lot like Peter here. So with that, I won't keep you guys any longer. I don't know if I'm supposed to, I can pray us out after this, but I'd rather do it in person, I think. So I hope you have a good day. Hopefully, I'm recording this on Friday and it's like perfect outside. It's so sunny, it's so warm. So fingers crossed it stays that way, because I feel like it's a lot easier to be ready to go and give your faith your all when it's sunny outside. But, yep, so have a good day. Bye, guys. Mwah. See you Tuesday night.